Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. And we thought, you know what? Because the season has started and there's a lot going on with the Michigan Wolverines, we're going to do a Michigan Monday podcast every week from now on, at least throughout the season, Tom. And Tom, how are you doing, by the way?
I'm not sure I committed to every week, but seemed like it might be relevant this week. Might be
Yeah,
relevant and of interest to our listener base.
certainly for the foreseeable future, as we both witnessed this weekend a shocking upset of biblical proportions as Michigan State went to Ann Arbor as I think at last point I saw maybe like 23.5 point underdogs and came away with a rousing 27-24 victory over the Wolverines that saw actually Michigan down by 10 in the fourth quarter. And so it wasn't really a 3-point game. It wasn't that close. And Michigan State controlled this game throughout, which sure it was tied at times, but they never really, you know how in the past it feels like Michigan State is going to blow something like the Sparty, and it's just inevitable. I never really felt that here in this one, although would I have been surprised? No.
Oh, I felt it when they're kicking field goals in like on 4th and 2, they're lining up for 51-yard field goals and they're up 3 and they line up on 4th and 2 for a 40-yard field goal. I went, oh man, they just lost that game. That was nothing makes me go all caps on Twitter faster than coaches just absolutely turtling in big moments, and they did some turtling. And the thing that was remarkable to me about this game was Michigan State wasn't that great. Like, they didn't run the ball well. They made some real dumb decisions, just game-wise, just kicking in times when it was like you're the underdog. You have to play like Jeff Hafley's playing against Clemson, and those games are going on at the same time. And Hafley's coaching against a huge favorite and calling crazy fake punts and stuff to draw them off sides and playing to win. Michigan State a lot of times felt like it was like, well, we're gonna try and turn this into a 3-point lead into a 6-point lead, which is like, yeah, I mean, I guess, or you could actually just go for the jugular and go for the win. They didn't do any of that, and they still won. Like that was remarkable to me.
And I think I tweeted, because this was going on the same time as the Clemson game. Is that correct?
Yes, they were both noon games.
Because I believe I tweeted very, very wisely that Mel Tucker was playing not to lose and Jeff Hafley was playing to win. Now let's see what happens, because obviously Jeff Hafley's going to win and Mel Tucker's going to lose. Except Tressel Ball wins again and Jeff Hafley lost. They didn't have the horses for the Clemson game. But I guess if you are going to play not to lose, it's best to do it against a team with a quarterback that is not the most accurate guy down the field.
I think it was Joel Klatt. I watched this kind of in bits and pieces because I was we did a pregame show at one point, so I missed the beginning of the game, and then we went out and got lunch at one point, so I missed a little bit of the middle of the game, and I went back and watched one of the kind of condensed versions of the game to kind of pick up bits and pieces. So I think this was Joel Klatt. Something he said was, Joe Milton puts no air underneath his deep ball. It just, everything's just on a rope. And like, that's fine. You want to throw slants and stuff? That's fine. But, then he throws a deep ball and he just airmails people like 10 yards all the time on deep balls. I mean, I think you were the one who had the stats on like how accurate he is beyond 10 yards downfield, 15 yards downfield. It's just like, nope, that's just not. I mean, it turns into Joe Bauserman passing chart pretty quickly once you get past the 10, 15 yards downfield.
Yeah, and it's the deep stuff that's not even close, really. But in terms of like beyond 20 yards, I think he is maybe like 1 of 8, something like that. And beyond 30, he's like 0 for 7. And in terms of like distance in the air, is how I've been tracking him, and it's just not close. And I think 20 of his 31 completions this week were 6 yards or less. And it's really just a bunch of screens and dump offs and check downs. And did you see Michigan's essentially final drive where they're down 10 with 5 minutes to go, and they're at like their own 7. So they've got to go downfield. They've got to score in a hurry. And they took, I think was it a 13 or an 18, I think 18 play drive lasted over 4 minutes, where his completions were, and I have this, I think in Michigan Monday here. Yeah. So on that drive, his completions were 13 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards, and 16 yards. 18 plays, I think 93 yards, 4:35 off the clock. And that's your 2-minute offense? I don't know.
Well, and the crazy thing is that last one that was like, 16 yards, that was great. No, that was another check down. I think that was Cornelius Johnson, and it was like a crossing route, and there were like 3 Spartan defenders there, and somehow he made them miss. But the whole drive was check down, check down, check down, and they don't have receivers that make you miss very often. So that pass that goes 4 yards in the air turns into a 4-yard gain, or the pass that goes 6 yards in the air turns into a 6-yard gain. Like, they don't have the make you miss guys that you would need to throw short of the sticks and have it go past the sticks. So the clock's just continuously running. I mean, he scrambled to pick up a 4th and 6, I think, at one point. I mean, there was a bunch of times that was like, very clearly guys were not open downfield. Like, Michigan receivers are just not getting open downfield. And, if your quarterback is scrambling on 4th and 6 with a do or die play, and he didn't make it by a ton, there were a bunch of times when it was like, oh man, they converted that by the skin of their teeth. And then they get down to first and goal. They go first and goal at the 2 with less than a minute left, and they run Chris Evans. Like, what are you doing? Throw the ball. 40. It was like a 50 seconds left, and it was at the point where they couldn't burn a timeout, because if they burned a timeout and they didn't recover the onside kick, Michigan State could run out the clock. And as it turned out, they got extraordinarily lucky, and I guess a Spartan got hurt, so they didn't end up having to burn the timeout that they thought they had to burn. It was very confusing and not particularly well explained on the game broadcast. But, the decision-making was just like, what do you do? Like, can you see the clock from where you are on the sidelines? Do you know what's going on?
It's almost like he can't not run the ball down there. Like, Jim Harbaugh he can't allow himself to not do that. And yeah, that was a terrible call, but were you surprised by it? I'm rarely surprised when I see Jim Harbaugh do something, whether he's calling the plays or not. I mean, it's still his offense, where it's like, why are you doing that? This isn't 1984. This isn't 1992. You don't. And as I wrote in Michigan Monday, like, every time Ben Mason touches the ball, it's a win for the defense. And I don't care. I know he scored last week. He had a 9-yard jet sweep this week, and I hope the audience heard that, because here's one difference.
A jet sweep to a fullback. What?
To the guy who was playing nose tackle last year.
What?
So let's think about this. Ohio State runs jet sweeps with Paris Campbell, Garrett Wilson, those kinds of guys. We saw Garrett Wilson start the game with one this past weekend, and it went 62 yards. We've seen Paris Campbell back in the day against Michigan have some success. Those are the guys that you should be running that with. Doing it with Ben Mason instead of these small speed and space guys that they love so much, to me, it's just a waste. And I know, and he gained like 9 yards, and that's great. But again, every time he touches the ball, it's a time when somebody else doesn't, and that somebody else could do more. And this offense needs every single yard it can get. Now, you're talking about the receivers who don't make you miss. And the crazy thing is, Michigan operates like they do. And we're talking about the speed and space with these guys. And we don't see a lot of speed. We don't see a lot of space. The A.J. Henning, the freshman, gets some sweeps, and he does fine. And Giles Jackson, Mike Sanders still did nothing in this. And Giles Jackson, I think, was like 7 for 58, and that's all good. But is it? I mean, that's like 8 yards a catch. That's not for your playmakers. That's not going to do it. And just all of these guys, as I've written before, they're all slot receivers except for Cornelius Johnson. This is the first time I've ever noticed him. And yes, I've seen him play in other games, and he's had to catch here and there. But this is the first time he was noticeable and had and made any kind of impact. And it wasn't a great impact. It was, I'll throw a name out there, Buster Tillman like. You know,
Yeah.
and go ahead.
No, what's interesting to me is they don't. It's all the stuff they don't have. Like they weren't able to run the ball consistently. They don't have guys who are making plays downfield, and part of that is inaccuracy of quarterback downfield. They don't have receivers who are making you miss to turn a short gain into a long gain, and they have a quarterback who's not consistent enough to be able to just, he was 32 of 51, so 60% of his passes. He's not hitting passes consistently enough that you feel like they could definitely just move the chains and just have a methodical drive. I mean, until the end of that game, when they didn't have time to have a methodical drive, then they had a methodical drive. But you just, until Michigan State's backing up and giving them a bunch of 4 or 5 yard passes, they couldn't do that. And it's like, so how are you going to move the ball? And I think everyone looked at that Minnesota game week 1 and went, oh man, they've got it figured out. And then Friday night watching that Minnesota-Maryland game, it was like, oh, okay, all right, okay. So Minnesota is literally the worst defense on the face of the earth. Oh, okay. And I just wonder how many Michigan fans watched that on Friday night and went, huh, I wonder if we might have a little bit of fool's gold after week 1. I mean, that is, you never want to overreact too much to week 1. And it was such an outlier. It was so far beyond what the expectation was for Michigan. It was like, all right, one of these teams is not what we thought it was. And I think a lot of people assumed, I mean, myself included. I mean, this is, I think I picked Michigan to beat Michigan State by about 40 points. So, I mean, this is not like I'm the clever one who wasn't fooled by this, but I think a lot of people were fooled by that. And then you watch that Minnesota-Maryland game on Friday night, it was like, huh.
I'm guessing after seeing that, maybe many of them put the turn the Michigan State Rutgers game on to like maybe make themselves feel better. Like, oh, it's okay, we still get to play Michigan State. Whew. And then because you watch in the 7 turnovers, and you're like, well, we can't possibly lose to these guys. And then you do, and it's like you said, it's not like anybody played overly poorly or overly well to like win or lose this game. Michigan offense, I'm now of the opinion that it's just time to go to Hassan Haskins and let him and Joe Milton run the ball between the two of them. Throw some Blake Corum out there a little bit here and there. He's the speedy freshman. Michigan compared him to J.K. Dobbins, much like the comparisons of Aiden Hutchinson to the Bosa's have been wildly accurate. Blake Corum is not quite J.K. Dobbins just yet, so maybe we'll hold off on that. But we have Ohio State fans complaining about Trey Sermon and Master Teague, and they can't get things going. Those guys are carrying the ball 12 to 15 times a game, both of them, so they're getting some opportunities. Here at Michigan, last week against Minnesota, it was 4 guys splitting 20 carries. This week, I think it was 4 guys splitting 21 carries. Tom, good luck with that.
Yeah, that you don't get a chance to get in any kind of rhythm. You have to, I mean, this may be one of those, if you have 3 quarterbacks or 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Like if you've got 4 running backs, you have no running backs. Like, and I think they have like, well, it feels like, well, Zach Charbonnet was pretty good for us last year. And then Chris Evans was pretty good for us the year before that. And we want to make sure Blake Corum feels like he's part of the team. And he's, he's, I mean, the people up there talk about him as, the hardest worker on the team, and you want to reward him for that. And, Hassan Haskins was the only one who actually ran the ball for anything on Saturday. So it's like, oh, well, you got to get him the ball. And it's like all of a sudden, like, well, how do you rotate the carries? I mean, you go back, 2 years with J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber, and it was like Ohio State, every time, sometimes it felt like they had trouble getting in a rhythm, just splitting time between 2 carries and 2 ball carriers and not being able to kind of, just when one was getting in a rhythm, it was like, okay, well, now this is the J.K. Dobbins had a good drive. Well, now it's the Mike Weber drive. So now J.K. Dobbins is standing on the sideline for another 5 minutes. Like that's hard. And that's balancing 2 guys, not 4. So yeah, that's a problem. And the other thing that struck me was how often it looked like Joe Milton was throwing it like just out of reach of the guy sitting underneath. Like we've talked about the 1-inch drill that the quarterbacks do with Ryan Day, where they put those big nets up and the quarterback had to try and throw it 1 inch over the net. And it's like, that's fantastic if you can do that. But he's trying to throw it like, there was I think a touchdown where it was like there were 2 Spartan defenders, maybe 3 between him and the receiver. And it was like somehow he threaded it through there. But that is not a long-term solution. Like sometimes those guys are going to get a hand on the ball. I mean, Antoine Simmons had a hand on a ball in the end zone and almost picked it off. I mean, that is not a sustainable long-term solution. And I don't know if that's, an absolute just abundance of confidence out of Milton and that he's going to have the pinpoint accuracy to do that, or if that's just not see, does he not see the guys underneath, or does he just not care and just, screw it, I'm going to fit it in there? Because if you can do that, great. But, based on some of the accuracy stuff we've seen, like, I don't know that that's a long-term great strategy for him.
Well, and the Ohio State 1-inch drill is about touch and dropping it just over the defender. And touch isn't something that Milton excels at right now. Like his dropping it 1 inch over the defender is like just it goes straight over the defender. There's no drop, and you just have to hope the guy behind the defender catches it, which has happened. But like look at the 49-yard touchdown pass to Chris Olave from Justin Fields. There were 3 defenders in the area, but he dropped it right into Chris Olave. When Joe Milton is throwing it to 3 defenders, the problem is one of those defenders might be the most open guy, because you don't know where that ball is going to go. And right now it seems like they have no confidence in him throwing the ball downfield. And I also don't know that they have the receivers to make the plays down the field because, again, as we said, they're slot guys. There's no Nico Collins who could go up and get it. There's no we saw Rashad Bateman and Minnesota's other receiver, I forget his name right now, but they both came down with passes last week, just jump balls basically. And Michigan doesn't have that, and maybe that's a good thing because Joe Milton doesn't have the accuracy to create the jump balls at this point, and so you just keep it simple basically, and take the little things and just try to move the ball the best you can. And then hope the offensive line holds up for you, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, because there are times where the Michigan State defensive line was controlling everything, including all-world right tackle Jalen Mayfield, who I was not very impressed with this game, who left the game, has some injury concerns. I don't know exactly that it's all that. I was looking for an update, and all I saw was I think maybe the X-rays were negative, so don't know how that's don't know a status yet for next week. But, this Michigan offensive line, Tom, isn't all that great either. Chuck Filiaga, I think the left guard, had some rough moments. And we know they start a former walk-on at center. Michigan has done this former walk-on stuff on the offensive line forever, defensive line as well. And that's all great. But it's also indicative of larger problems, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, former walk-on starting is like, this is both a heartwarming story and also a huge red flag. That, like, it's great. It is wonderful that he is, seen his career through and grown but you should have someone better than that if you're Michigan. Like sometimes you'll have that at Illinois or something where, this is someone who's really put in the work and earned his time. Like that does not happen at Ohio State now very often. There are walk-ons who they're very high on, and they're walk-ons who are impact players. But a lot of times they're impact players on special teams. Like that's like offensive line. Like that is a depth issue. And, they lost 4 guys last year 4 starters off that line. And, after the Minnesota game, there was just sort of this idea in the Michigan blogosphere that it's like, well, you should have known because Ed Warner is the offensive line coach. So of course he had them ready. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe, but first-time offensive line starters generally take a while to gel and to really work together well and to really know what they're doing and not have issues. Like there were just some relatively basic stunts that looked like they just ate Michigan alive on Saturday. And it looked a lot like an offensive line with 4 new starters. And, Ed Warner is a good position coach. He is. He was a good position coach at Ohio State. He's a good position coach at Michigan. But, guess what? Greg Stewara is also, he's also an okay position coach. And guess what? He has a bunch of 5 stars So guess what? They're going to have a much better offensive line because you just have better raw material you're working with. Like recruiting is a very important part in this process, and the fact that Michigan has, 4 new starters, one of them a former, a fifth-year guy who's a former walk-on, like that's like, you can only get those guys to a certain point, and it's going to take a while to get them to a certain point because as every time you talk to any offensive lineman ever, they talk about the importance of working together and gelling as a unit and all that kind of stuff, and that takes time. Like there is no shortcut there, and Michigan I think found that out in a pretty tough way on Saturday.
I think the last Ohio State walk-on offensive lineman to have like a significant impact, would that be like Mike Stafford back in 2002?
Yeah, that's the most recent one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Antonio Smith, 2006 cornerback for the Buckeyes, was a walk-on, but he was also a Thorpe semifinalist, so he was actually pretty decent. So there's some guys from the past who have done it, and just this past week, Chris Booker last week was Ohio State special teams player of the game. As you said, walk-ons have an impact on special teams at Ohio State, as they do everywhere, just because that's numbers issues. But yeah, it's just like you said, it's a red flag on offense or defense. And if we want to go to the Michigan defense, then there is also that same issue. Once Cam McGrone went down, the middle linebacker, then he was replaced by Adam Shibley, who is either a walk-on or a former walk-on. And he played well. He had 7 tackles like in the second half. But again, you are supposed to be recruiting past these guys, beyond these guys. These guys are depth guys. They should be on your scout team. They shouldn't be in your too deep. And with all due respect, I'm saying these things with all due respect. Your walk-ons shouldn't be in your too deep at linebacker, because that's where your recruiting comes in. And if your recruits aren't filling out your too deep, then you need to get new coaches because they're not doing their job.
Yeah, the Massachusetts All-Stars is like a wonderful idea in principle, but it's real hard to evaluate guys who are playing high school football in Massachusetts, because guess what's true about most high school football in Massachusetts? It's not very good. I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay.
Connecticut high school football. This was 25 years ago, but it's still true. Connecticut high school football is not very good. I watched Connecticut high school football for 4 years. I come out to Ohio. I see Ohio high school football. It's like a different sport. Football's not that big a sport in Connecticut. Like lacrosse is a big sport in Connecticut. Hockey's a big sport in Connecticut. The same is true in Massachusetts. Like it is not, high school football is not a religion out there the way it is in the Midwest. And so, like, yes, you will have individual talented players, but who are they going up against? Like, it looks like you're playing a middle school league. Like, oh, well, the wide receiver is dominating all of these 5'8" guys who run a 4.9. Like, oh, congratulations, that's great. That'll play great. That's exactly what you'll expect in the Big Ten. So it'll be fine. It'll play just fine.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the skill levels and what it looked like in Connecticut out there, because we appreciate Don Brown on this show and on all of our shows, all platforms. We appreciate Don Brown, but I don't need a guy landing the best players in Massachusetts or putting a fence around Connecticut, or you know what, we've got the 10 best guys from Rhode Island. It does me no good, because now I've got walk-ons in my too deep. And then people wonder, why does Ohio State keep scoring 62 points on you? Or how did Michigan State beat you? And I'm not saying it's because of walk-ons. I am saying it's because of recruiting and the fact that you are playing. You have a team of 3-star corners who are, one, not very fast. Sure, they're tall and long, but when they keep getting run past, length only does you no good if you can't catch up, and they couldn't catch up yesterday.
I hear you blaspheming Rhode Island football. And Kwity Paye is a very good football player. He's a product of Rhode Island. But you go through.
He's the product of Rhode Island.
Right, exactly. Like you go through. I think Rhode Island is one of the states that Ohio State had never had literally never had a player from. Never. And There's a reason for that. It's a very small state. There's not a lot of very good players. Kwity Paye has turned into a very good player for Michigan. Kwity Paye is quite possibly the best player out of Rhode Island in like 15, 20 years, probably. But I mean, to your point on the corners, like, you're right. They're not fast enough. They are not fast enough to run the defense that Don Brown wants to do. Don Brown is getting a little bit to the point where it's just like he just throws rock, and then someone throws paper, and he goes, "Aha! They'll never expect me to throw rock again." And you've got that Dr. Blitz nickname, and it's cute and it's wonderful, and he's this wonderful character. If you do not have the corners to play press man, you cannot play press man. I mean, Ohio State ran into press man issues a couple of years ago with Greg Schiano, and it's like you may need a plan B right now because plan A ain't working. And that was what burned Michigan on Saturday. Was they're trying to play press man, and Michigan State just has this true freshman run right past them. And it's like, and it wasn't like this is some 5-star recruit. Ricky White was the number 70 wide receiver in the 2020 class. Number 70, number 416 player overall from Marietta, Georgia. And if you're from Marietta, Georgia, that means that you are not from like an underscouted region. Like Marietta, Georgia is a big city in a big college, big high school football state. People saw him. This was not like someone who was overlooked. This is someone who was deemed to be the number 70 overall wide receiver and had offers from a bunch of MAC schools and low-level Power 5. Like this was not like someone that Michigan State stole from Notre Dame and Ohio State and Penn State. It was like Kansas and Coastal Carolina, Mercer, a bunch of MAC schools. Like, I mean, it was, the Power 5 offers were all the teams that don't make bowls. So this is not, he had one heck of a day on Saturday. It was 8 catches, 196 yards, 1 touchdown. I mean, how many wide receivers on Ohio State's team do you think are probably bigger, faster, stronger, better receivers than Ricky White? 8? I mean, and it wasn't. Here's the thing that was mind blowing. It wasn't like he was running this incredible route tree. It was just like, all right, 9 route, 9 route, 9 route, 9 route. There was one where I think he might have done like a double move, or it was just kind of like a stop and go. That was the first time, one of the few times that you saw them playing off. They're playing 10 yards off him. He does a stop and go. Gray comes up, and I think it was Gray in coverage, comes up, bites on it real hard, and just does the road runner, beep, beep, another 40-yard gain. I don't know what they think. How did you look at those corners and go, I know what we're going to do with these guys. These guys can run with anyone in press man. Like, were you watching practice? I don't get that at all.
Yeah, and it's almost like that's the only thing he knows, so that's what he has to do. And when you have coaches, this is all they know how to do, then again, it's time to maybe get new coaches. And I'm not here to talk about old dogs, new tricks. It could be a young dog that can't do new tricks either, as maybe we saw with Alex Grinch in Ohio State, and maybe as Oklahoma is seeing with Alex Grinch now. And, who's to say? They're really there, but even Jalen Naylor, the other wide receiver for Michigan State, number 750 overall in 2018, number 118 receiver in the class, number 7 player in Nevada. Do you know who his quarterback was back in the day?
I'm going to guess it is the greatest 5'3" quarterback in the history of the sport of football. Am I correct?
You are. I'm going to assume, because he played at Bishop Gorman, so I'm assuming yes, they were there together. And he had Jalen Naylor. I think he caught 2. One was like a 53, and there was others where he caught one out of bounds, just out of bounds. But yeah, like Vincent Gray had a holding call, pass interference call, gave up a 53-yarder to Naylor, gave up a 50-yarder to Ricky White, and then gave up another 40-yarder to Ricky White. Then gets benched. He's their best corner. I mean, that was the assumption. I mean, losing Ambry Thomas is clearly bad. Vincent Gray was supposed to be the guy that was going to step up. He gets benched. They bring in redshirt freshman Jalen Perry, and either the next play or the next play after that, he gets flagged for holding on a pass down the field because he got turned around. And then he eventually gave up like a 31-yarder to Ricky White. And Jamon Green, the other starting corner, he had a pass interference. He gave up a 30-yarder. He also got beaten on another one. It doesn't matter which of these corners are out there. Their best cover guy is Daxton Hill, the safety, who now, I don't know what they do, but they need to get to the quarterback. All pass defense starts with those defensive ends. And if Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye aren't getting there, they have no shot with these corners. And they can maybe try some others like DJ Turner and some other guys that are moving from safety to corner. And you're reading these scouting reports that say, well, they moved him to safety because he's too slow to play corner. And it's like, if he moved to safety in high school because he's too slow to play corner, I don't know that he's going to be fast enough to then move from safety in college to corner in high school. When I'm thinking like C. Grant moving from linebacker to corner at Ohio State back in 2001, that's almost what you have to do here. But Tom, that was year 1 of Jim Tressel. This is year 6 of Jim Harbaugh to have these issues. But again, it goes back to recruiting. I wrote this about Rich Rodriguez years ago. When you're recruiting against Purdue, you're going to have Purdue's roster. And that's basically what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and this is one of these like great truisms of college football. Like if you knew nothing about a team other than the fact that they are taking safeties and moving them to corner, you can make some assumptions that defense is going to have some problems. Like taking a corner and moving to safety, that's fine. Like that's not necessarily a red flag. Taking safeties and moving them to corner, that's a problem. That's going the wrong direction on the spectrum. Like that's like, if you take a shortstop and move them to third base, they're probably fine. Everyone who plays shortstop can probably do a pretty good job at third base because the skill sets are the same and the demands are a little bit more demanding at shortstop. Go in the other direction, there's plenty of third basemen who would not make good shortstop because you don't have the range. Like you have the glove, you have the arm, but you don't have the range. That's what the issue is with moving safeties to corner. Like if you're moving to safety, there's probably either, the hips aren't fluid enough, the speed isn't quick enough, change of direction, like whatever it is. Like there is something in your game that does not translate well to being a corner. So if you're moving from safety to corner, that's a problem. Michigan's biggest problem is they don't have enough Dax Hills. Like Ohio State has a bunch of wide receivers who are, the wide receiver equivalent of someone with Dax Hill's skill. Michigan has one. Like that's a problem. And I mean, you mentioned Vince Gray being their best corner. I think people might go, "Whoa, how do you know that?" I'm going to read you a direct quote today from Jim Harbaugh. Ready? Open quote. "Vince is our best corner. He's an extremely good player. I expect Vince will bounce right back." I mean, okay, maybe. I mean, there are issues there that are not fixable overnight in a week. Like, and they have Indiana this week. They're on the road at Indiana. Then they have Wisconsin. Like, this might get worse before it gets better.
But the good news is they do have 1 3-star cornerback committed in the 2021 class, so that should fix everything next year, which is great news for Michigan. And I do think it's like, what do you do? Do you put Daxton Hill as your number 1 corner and then try to figure out what you have behind him? Because here's the other problem. You also have issues at safety. Now, true freshman Makari Page is a guy that Ohio State wanted a little bit. Maybe you pair him back there with Brad Hawkins, who is their starter, and maybe you try to make that work. But again, you still have, like, is Jamon Green then your number 2 with Hill? Maybe he is, but it's just because he hasn't been benched yet either. And obviously, Vincent Gray will be back in the lineup next week. It's not like he's disappeared forever. But this is going to be an ongoing problem. If Michael Penix is accurate next week, Michigan's going to lose. If he's not, then they can win. I think that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Yeah, and that's I mean, for the Indiana-Michigan game to be in Indiana's hands, like if Indiana plays well, they're going to win. That's not how that's supposed to go. That is supposed to be, if Michigan plays their game and plays well, they'll win. Michigan is supposed to have a huge talent advantage over Indiana, and if you have a bad day, you have a bad day, and you can lose. This is the Ohio State-Iowa day. This is the Ohio State-Purdue day. Like, more talented teams can lose if you have a bad day. Michigan should not be able to have, play an okay game and lose to Indiana. That is not how that's supposed to work. But yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, we have seen enough from Indiana that, Penix was not great against Penn State, but he was a lot better last weekend. And, granted that was Rutgers, but if I tell you that Whop Philyor puts up 150 yards and a couple touchdowns this weekend on this Michigan defense, would that be like, oh no, that can't happen?
Well, if Daxton Hill is on him in the slot, I don't think it will. But if they're moving him around, it could be any of those guys. Really, just who heard of Ricky White before yesterday or before whatever day, Saturday? Like you see a catch and you're like, wonder who that is. It's Ricky White. Oh, okay. Well, then the next time, oh, who's that? Oh, it's Ricky White. Didn't he have a catch earlier? Then, like by the third quarter, you're like, just throw it to Ricky White, man. And Rocky Lombardi, like, there's a reason the pass rush wasn't getting to him a lot of times. It's that he would just, as soon as he would drop back 3 steps or 5 steps or whatever, he's just like, I'm just going to chuck it. And we've been saying for so long, just throw it downfield against these guys. Throw it downfield against Michigan. We said it last week with the Minnesota game, and they were so scared to do it because they were missing half of their offensive line, and they had such respect for Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye and also the interior guys. But when you've got a couple, Chris Ottman-Bell is their other receiver, Minnesota's other receiver with Rashad Bateman, when you got those guys, throw it up and see what happens. Michigan State threw it deep 10 times, not counting the 4 odd penalties. They completed 5 of the 10 deep passes they threw over 30 yards. When you do that, that's success. We talk about 50-50 balls. When you complete 50% of those down the field in one-on-one coverage, and it's not like they were jump balls. There was a couple that were the defense was there, but most of the time the defense was certainly not there. And 2 of those incompletions were Daxton Hill. And so the other corners allowed, 8 of 10 or whatever, whatever the number is, Tom, 5 of 8. They 5 of 8 were completed against the corners, and that's bad.
Well, the whole idea of 50-50 balls is not you complete 50% of them. It's that, like, the teams have an equal opportunity to get them. So they completed 5 of them. How many of them were intercepted? 0. I didn't need to chart that because Rocky Lombardi threw 0 interceptions. Rocky Lombardi is not a great quarterback. His career completion rate is 49.2%, and a lot of that is 2 years ago, and he was kind of hurt last year, didn't play much. And he was good against Rutgers, but against Michigan, 17 for 32, which is not good. Normally you see 17 for 32, you're like, oh, well, they must have lost by a bunch, until you get to 323 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's almost 20 yards per completion. That's insane. And then you add in, I think you got to a point where those Michigan defensive backs started to panic. Like you gave up a big play or 2, and then you start getting grabby. And that's a defensive backfield that probably has a little bit of a reputation for getting grabby. But when you can do that in a subtle way, you can do that in a way that's sort of the clever, like, little tug on the back of the jersey that's not real noticeable, or you can, like, grab a guy's arm and pull it because you're going, oh crap, I'm going to get burned again, oh crap. And they were doing the oh crap, and those are real easy to get called. And so then they're 5 of 10 for whatever the yardage was that you just said there, but you add in a couple more 15-yarders here and there, that all adds up. And that's a big problem, and that's a problem that doesn't get solved this year because it's not like there's someone on the roster that is very likely to be able to just oh, it turns out we had 3 Shaun Wades on the roster. Oh, why didn't we play them against Michigan State? We should have done that. Like, these are problems that are going to take a while to sort out. And like you mentioned, like, their 2021 recruiting class does not have solutions for that problem in it yet. So this could be a multi-year thing. And that's a real problem.
I'm just thinking in my head, like, what would David Bell do to this Michigan secondary? You're talking like 18 targets and probably like 15 catches for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, something like that. It would be pretty bad. Tom, let's start to wrap up here. And one of the things we do with Michigan Monday is after, we talk about the offense, talk about the defense, talk about the special teams. Really no reason to talk about the special teams this week. It wasn't all that. There's nothing dramatic there. Is what does it all mean? And one of the things that we should touch on in terms of what does it all mean is after the game, when Joe Milton is asked about Antoine Simmons, Michigan State linebacker Antoine Simmons, who had 11 tackles, 2 pass breakups, almost had the interception in the end zone on the Hassan Haskins wildcat throw, which is another issue entirely. But Joe Milton said he didn't know who that guy was. He wasn't on my radar, and said this while kind of smiling and chuckling, like he hadn't just lost a very big game to a hated rival. And for me, it comes down to 2 things, neither of which are good. Either Antoine Simmons, Michigan State's leading tackler, who had 11 tackles and 3 tackles for loss in the season opener, wasn't on Joe Milton's radar, in which case that's terrible preparation on the part of the coaching, on the part of the player, on the part of the coordinators. Or he did know who Antoine Simmons was, perfectly knew who he was, and refused to give him any credit for being acknowledgeable, basically. Like acting like he is so beneath Joe Milton himself, which goes back to the Michigan arrogance that, to me, I think Michigan thought they won this game after they beat Minnesota and saw Michigan State lose to Rutgers. They figured this thing was done in the bag, and that Michigan arrogance came out. And then, as I think I wrote in Michigan State, in Michigan Monday, it's like only one team came to fight. Michigan State came to fight. And you saw Michigan players leaving the field with injuries and shock and awe, basically, and just the lack of respect that Michigan came into this game with. I guess it's no surprise they lost.
Well, you don't want to get too big into reading body language. And, I don't know Joe Milton very well, but like when Ohio State loses a game, do you ever see players like smiling during post-game interviews? Like, I mean, never, ever, ever. It's like a funeral when Ohio State loses a football game. And I don't know, maybe Joe Milton, I have not seen a lot of Joe Milton press conferences. So maybe like smiling is like a nervous thing that he does or something. So maybe, but someone pointed this out. There was a play where Joe Milton picked up, I think, a 3rd and 6, something like that, like a big scramble, picked up a first down right in front of the Michigan sideline, like big play when they really needed a first down. Joe Milton makes a play, scrambles. There's like no reaction from the Michigan sideline. Just they're standing there. It's like a commercial break. There's just nothing going. There's no reaction, no response, no cheering, no going over, giving him a fist bump, nothing. Just absolute dead silence. Like I don't know. It's like that whole program is in a coma. I don't know what to make of it, but this is we did a show on the Morning Scoop, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, where it was like, I don't know what's going on with Michigan, but something is very wrong there. There's just a bunch of weird stuff going on in that program right now, and the recruiting isn't very good. Harbaugh's contract is up after next year, even before the game on Saturday, which sure felt like the end of the Jim Harbaugh era to me. Like that felt very much like okay, and now it's done. There's no coming back from this. There's something weird going on in that program, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And there hasn't, I don't think anyone has gotten past this isn't right. Like as far as like what it is, I don't know if Jim Harbaugh is just like he's done, but you look at him 5 years ago when he came in and he's full of energy and full of life, and now it's just like it is like the world has beaten him down, and he just he looks like a guy who knows he doesn't have the answers anymore and knows that he's going to keep getting asked the questions and just doesn't, it's like, well, I thought I could do this and I can't do this. And, at that point it's time for a change. And like I said, they could lose this weekend at Indiana. They could lose next weekend against Wisconsin. They got Penn State coming in Thanksgiving weekend. They've got Ohio. They play at Ohio State. What does Jim Harbaugh have to do to get Michigan fans back in his corner by the end of the year? I mean, is there an answer there that does not involve beating Ohio State? If they run the table into that Ohio State game and then lose the Ohio State game by 3 touchdowns again, I mean, congratulations, you're 6-2. You lost to your 2 big rivals, and I don't think anyone gives a crap if they beat Penn State this year if they lose to Ohio State by 3 touchdowns and lose to Michigan State.
Yeah, I think his only hope, assuming he wants to stay there, which I guess he does, is that this is a pandemic year and you don't get fired for struggling in sports when it's just such an odd year. Maybe I don't know that that will save him if things go poorly. And I'm not saying I don't think Michigan is going to lose to Maryland, but if these corners play poorly again and Tagovailoa gets time with those receivers, because Maryland has some playmakers that could make that interesting, at least for a little bit. I don't know that they would be able to stop anything Michigan does, even because that's going to be, that's the second to last game. So you figure like things are starting to mesh with the Michigan passing game a little bit more in theory. But, it might be interesting. And we've seen some interesting games there with our own two eyes with against much better teams than this Michigan team. So maybe just keep that one in mind. But yeah, the Indiana game, I think Michigan opened up like a 3-point favorite or 3.5-point favorite. Then it was down to like 3. I had somebody tweet me saying it's like 4.5 at their book. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's kind of.
Why are you telling me instead of throwing money at them?
Because I can definitely see Michigan winning, but giving Indiana 4.5 points, that's a little spicy.
Yeah, I mean, again, like this is still Indiana football.
Mm-hmm.
They did beat Penn State, but it's still Indiana football. They have a lot of the same issues that Michigan does in terms of depth and if Michael Penix goes down, and then what? Because Peyton Ramsey's at Northwestern now. So, and Michigan has the Joe Milton goes down, and then what question? And Michael Penix is a little bit like Joe Milton, where the accuracy is like, it's okay, but you're not, he's not a guarantee. They do not have, neither of those teams has a Justin Fields, but there's Indiana has enough weapons on offense, and the defense is, Tom Allen's a defensive coach, and he has done a pretty decent job turning them into a little bit more of a solid defensive unit overall. Like, I if you asked Michigan fans like their confidence level going into this Indiana game, where one is, absolutely, one is we're playing the Kansas City Chiefs and there's no possible way we're going to win, and 10 is, we're playing Delaware State and we're going to win by 900. Like, what's their confidence level going into Indiana? 3, 4? I mean, like, it's not, this is a game. This is probably going to be a pretty competitive game, but I don't think Michigan fans or players or coaches are probably feeling great about it going into it.
I keep thinking that Indiana's offense with Michael Penix and running back Stevie Scott, you do some RPOs on some slants against these corners, and then you've also got some tight ends that are good that they can get involved in the middle of the field and move the ball. But I think it comes down to Penix and his accuracy. But then this is also an up and down Michigan program. Maybe this is going to be an up week, and that's just a frustrating thing. And when you are up, you are down, you're up. You have no consistency, you have no foundation, you really have no culture at that point. And Tom, we can go back to the 2018 Amazon Prime show about the 2017 Michigan season. And we were talking about it then. The lack of energy, juice, joy, fun. There's nothing there. And nothing gets added. Like, no joy gets added, no energy. And until you go and get Jeff Hafley, Matt Campbell, anybody can do what Jim Harbaugh is doing at this place right now. And more guys could do better because they would have the energy and be able to click with recruits, with coaches, because Jim Harbaugh doesn't click. And there's a number of guys out there who could do better. Shoot, I think Mike Norvell could do better. Don't put that in the show.
Yeah, I do think that someone who's younger and honestly, like the thing that Michigan needs more than anyone else is question number 1 in the interview. Have you met Bo Schembechler? No. Okay, good. Now you get to advance to question number 2. Like, if the answer to question number 1 is yes, no. Sorry. Thank you for coming in. I still maintain that Rich Rodriguez could have worked at Michigan if they'd given him more time. I think that's he was a good enough coach that he probably could have. But 3 years where they're completely turning over the offense. He was doing basically, not quite, but kind of what Jeff Collins is doing at Georgia Tech right now, where it's like you're completely changing your roster, and that does not happen overnight. And they got better every year. They won 2 more games each year than the previous year, and I think they probably could have continued that trend if they had had a little more patience. But they didn't have patience, and then they brought in a Michigan man, and boy, how did that work for one season when they recovered every single fumble, and Ohio State and Penn State both had incredible once in a century off-field issues, and they parlayed that into a Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech. And then that was it. And they didn't win the conference. They didn't win the division. Okay. And that's the high watermark. That is the high watermark of the last 14 years. Since literally the day that Bo died, that's it. That's the high watermark. They won the Sugar Bowl against like a 23rd ranked Virginia Tech team. Okay. So yeah, they're a little like Texas to me. Like, they have a whole lot of boosters who just need to get the heck out of the way and let someone come in who's a little bit more high energy, a little bit more, bring in some outside ideas, maybe don't do things, quote unquote, the Michigan way. And, I think that Michigan people will hear that and go, oh, well, our issues are because we're too pure and too what? No, that's not. No, your issues are that you're trapped in 1986. It is not still 1986. I'm very sorry. The game has passed Jim Harbaugh by. The game has passed Don Brown by. And Jim Harbaugh, like you said, listen to a Ryan Day press conference for 30 minutes. Listen to a Jim Harbaugh press conference for 30 minutes. Tell me, if you were a high school player, which one of those guys seems like more of a fun person to spend 4 years with? Ta-da! Ready? The prestige. I have revealed the answer to you. Ta-da!
Well, and now they're on the verge of losing recruiting battles with Michigan State with offensive lineman Rayshon Benny. And I mean, that's of the many red flags, that's just another one. But who knows? They'll probably beat Indiana by 35 this week, and everything will be fine until they lose to Wisconsin.
Rutgers.
Tom. No.
Gerd, it's happened before.
That's true. It has happened before, those two heated rivals. And actually, I mean, Rutgers already has a transitive win over Michigan this year. So they could conceivably go to 2-0 against the Wolverines this year.
I'm about to ask a crazy question. Is that game in Piscataway or Ann Arbor?
It is in Piscataway. So, and it's probably going to be at 7:30 p.m. like BTN game where Michigan does not want to be there. It didn't even seem like they wanted to be in Ann Arbor on Saturday, because it's like, well, why do we have to play this game? We know we're better. we already won this game. Come on. Why do we have to play it? And then blam, everything bad happens. Tom, you got anything else before we call it a show?
I think we are pretty much done for today, and we'll have a couple more traditional Buckeye Weekly shows. We're actually talking about the Buckeyes coming up a little later on this week. And then we just said the name, Rutgers. It's Rutgers week, Tony. Get excited.
Woo woo. I hope that wasn't on camera. Yeah, Rutgers week. It's going to be fun. Greg Schiano back in Ohio Stadium. Pray for the safeties. That's all I got to say.
Just like the last time he was in Ohio Stadium, there's going to be some points.
Tom, come on. All right. Before Tom gets any meaner with Greg Schiano, and really, I've said this before, of all of the tweets that I've had to delete in my life, 94% of them are about Rutgers. And it's just, I tweet it, I leave it out there, and then I'm like, I feel really bad. I feel bad about this. Let me go ahead and delete this, because I'm just some schlub. I shouldn't be saying these mean things about Gary Nova, for one. Gary Nova, if you're out there, I apologize for every terrible thing I've said. I'm not saying you deserved it, but I'm saying I was probably right at the time. It was just the wrong way to say it. So for me to you, I apologize. I don't know that I would apologize to any of the other quarterbacks that I've said bad things about, because at least Gary Nova, I believe he beat Michigan. Is that correct?
That's probably about the right era. So yeah, somewhere in there, he was at least beating Michigan adjacent, if nothing else.
There you go. All right, that'll do it then. Tom, what's coming up on the Morning Scoop Tuesday?
Well, Tuesday we do a Tuesday Chalk Talk Day with Ross Fulton, who's the X's and O's guru from Buckeye Scoop. And I was telling you before we hit record, Tuesdays might be my favorite show because those are the shows where I get to sound very smart because I get to look at Ross's article before the show, and I'm like, aha. So, Ross, tell me about one thing I noticed, Ross. Here's what Ohio State was doing. Am I right there? Did I read? Is that correct? Yeah, it's that is going to be, that was one of those things where I had Ross on a couple times over the summer, and people said, "Hey, that show's really good. You should have Ross on more." And so now we're during the season. It's just going to be the Tuesday Chalk Talk show with Ross, and that is definitely something that if you want to listen and if you want to sound smarter than your friends when you watch football on Saturdays, that is the show to listen to. And then Ross also drops an article. The corresponding article to that show drops on Tuesday at BuckeyeScoop.com, so make sure you check that out as well.
I will say, Tom, there are plenty of reviews of the Buckeye Weekly podcast from people who say that they listen to the show and then are smarter when they talk to coworkers as well. So it's not just your Tuesday shows that make people smarter. Sometimes I've read the review one time from a person who said that listening to the show makes them smarter. And I don't know if it's because of some subliminal ads that are playing beneath us, like maybe it's beneath the tracks. And but hey, I'm taking credit for that. You can take some credit for that, and we appreciate those reviews. In fact, we appreciate all reviews, provided they are 5-star reviews. Mainly, is that correct?
Yes, please do go ahead. This is one of the things that you hear people on podcasts say, but it really does help. Like, please go take a second on your little podcast app right now. I know iPhones have them on the Apple Podcast app. Just leave us a 5-star review and rating, and write a little review. It can just be a sentence or two. Hey, Tom and Tony are the greatest things in my life right now.
They make me smarter.
My life is better when they release shows, and they're doing an extra show this week, so my life is even better. And there's nothing else going on in the world right now this week, so this is just focus on the fact that it's Rutgers week. Don't go on Twitter. This is me giving you the best life advice I can give you. Stay off of Twitter this week. Stay off of Facebook this week. Just listen to the show a few times, and we're going to release an extra show to help distract you even more tomorrow. So you get a Monday show to distract you during the day on Tuesday. We'll have a Tuesday show to distract you Tuesday night, and another one on Thursday. We get a morning scoop episode every day. We are doing everything we can to make this week as pleasant as possible for you.
We are your shiny pie pans in the tree of your life. So get distracted by that, or I think that's like you're supposed to stay out of the trees then. So we are not your shiny pie pans. We are the inviting cherries in the tree that you eat. And so we thank you for joining us. As Tom said, stay off the internet except for BuckeyeScoop.com. In fact, what you ought to do is just, if you're not a member yet, become a member. Just spend your time there, because you know what is a nice thing about the Ask the Insiders message board? No politics. So if you're into that sort of thing, plus there's all kinds of insider information, practice reports, commitment stuff coming up. There's some huge recruiting stuff, and every day right now it seems like we're getting something on there that then Kirk Barton will go and blast an email out and say, hey, you might want to check this out, because there is news happening constantly. So we'll call it a day. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed our first ever Michigan Monday podcast. I know I did, Tom. Did you enjoy it?
I did. And you know what? I think we might do a whole week of Michigan podcast the week of the Michigan game. Might be good.
I do enjoy those as well, because we really break things down and get into it. And it looks like it's going to be a really good game this year. So there'll be a lot to break down. We will say goodbye now. Everybody have a good day. We will talk to you actually tomorrow. Have a good one.